The front door was unlocked. For a man who had spent the last 3 years teaching himself how to live with loss, how to raise a child alone, and how to survive silence without breaking, that single detail felt louder than thunder. Armand Qureshi stood frozen on the threshold of his own house, his travel bag slipping from his fingers, his heart pounding like it was trying to warn him of something he wasn't ready to face. The curtains inside shifted softly in the daytime breeze, sunlight spilled across the familiar floor tiles, and yet everything felt wrong. Not broken, not destroyed, just changed in a way that made his chest tighten. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles life sometimes hides in the most unexpected places, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Heartfelt Stories. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Armand had not told anyone he was coming back early. His work contract abroad had ended weeks ahead of schedule, and he wanted to surprise his little daughter, Meher, who had been living with his elderly aunt while he tried to build a future strong enough to carry both of them. He had imagined the moment 100 times. Her laughter, her tiny feet running across the floor, the way she would throw herself into his arms, as if nothing in the world had ever changed. But now, standing there, staring into a house that felt both familiar and foreign, something inside him whispered that the surprise was no longer his to give. The air smelled different, not unpleasant, just lived in but not by him. There was a faint scent of detergent he didn't recognize, mixed with something warm, like freshly cooked bread. His gaze moved slowly across the living room, taking in small details that his tired mind tried to piece together. A folded shawl draped over the back of a chair that had always been empty. A pair of women's sandals neatly placed near the door. A glass of water half full on the table, catching the sunlight like a quiet witness. Armand stepped inside, each movement cautious, as if he feared that any sudden noise might shatter whatever fragile truth lay waiting. 3 years earlier, his world had ended in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and fading hope. His wife, Sanaa, had slipped away after a long illness, leaving behind a silence that no words could fill in a child too young to understand why her mother would never come back. Armand had buried his grief under responsibility, under long work hours, under the stubborn belief that if he just kept moving, the pain might eventually stay behind. But pain has a way of traveling with you. And now, standing in his own home, he felt it rise again, different this time, mixed with confusion, suspicion, and something he couldn't quite name. He heard movement from inside, a soft, careful sound, the kind that doesn't belong to intruders, but to someone trying not to disturb. His breath caught as he moved toward the hallway. The sunlight followed him, stretching shadows along the walls like silent companions. His pulse quickened with every step until he reached the doorway to the kitchen. And there, with her back turned to him, stood a woman he had never seen before. She was young, draped in a simple, faded dupatta, her posture carrying a quiet exhaustion that spoke of long days and longer nights. She was stirring something in a pot, her movements gentle, almost practiced, like someone who had learned to care for others even when her own world had fallen apart. For a moment, Armand just watched, unable to speak, unable to understand. Then the floor creaked beneath his foot. The woman turned. Her eyes widened in shock, the color draining from her face as she took a step back, gripping the edge of the counter, as if it were the only thing holding her upright. Fear flickered across her features, quickly followed by something deeper, uncertainty, maybe even shame. Armand finally found his voice, but it came out rough, strained, unfamiliar even to him. He demanded to know who she was and what she was doing in his house, but the question felt heavier than the words themselves. The woman hesitated, her lips parting as if she wanted to explain everything at once, but didn't know where to begin. Her name, she said quietly, was Zoya, and she wasn't supposed to be here like this. The story that followed did not unfold in dramatic bursts, but in slow, careful layers, like peeling back years of hidden struggle, one truth at a time. Zoya had been widowed barely a year ago. Her husband, a factory worker, had died in an accident that left her with nothing but debts and a reputation society was too quick to judge. With no family willing to take her in and no resources to stand on her own, she had drifted from place to place, surviving on odd jobs and the kindness of strangers who often expected more than she could give. It was Armand's aunt, Parveen Begum, who had found her, Parveen had always been the kind of woman who believed that helping someone wasn't charity. It was duty. She had seen Zoya sitting outside a clinic one afternoon, clutching a worn-out bag, her eyes empty in a way that only comes from losing everything too soon. And without asking too many questions, Parveen had brought her home. At first, it was meant to be temporary. A few days of shelter, a chance to breathe, but days turned into weeks. And somewhere along the way, Zoya became more than just a guest. She became the person who woke up early to prepare meals, who kept the house clean, who sat with little Meher when she cried for her mother, who told her stories in soft, soothing tones until the child fell asleep. She became the quiet presence that filled the emptiness without trying to replace what had been lost. Parveen had meant to tell Arman many times, but every call with him had been filled with updates about work, about money, about plans for the future. And each time, she had convinced herself that this was something better explained in person, something that could be understood more easily when seen rather than told. And now, here he was. Arman listened, but the weight inside him didn't lift. If anything, it grew heavier. It wasn't just about a stranger living in his house. It was about the realization that life had moved forward in his absence, in ways he had not been a part of, that his home, his child, his memories had continued to evolve without him standing there to witness it. He felt like an outsider in his own life. Zoya, sensing the storm behind his silence, kept her distance. She spoke only when necessary, her voice always soft, always careful, as if she feared that one wrong word might send her back into a world she had barely escaped. Days passed in a strange, uneasy rhythm. Arman stayed. He didn't ask Zoya to leave, not immediately. Perhaps because of Meher. When he finally saw his daughter again, running toward him with pure, unfiltered joy, everything inside him broke and healed at the same time. She clung to him, laughing and crying, her tiny hands holding on to him as if she was afraid he might disappear again. But what struck him most was what came next. She turned to Zoya, not with hesitation, not with distance, but with the easy affection of a child who had found comfort where she needed it most. That was the moment Arman realized this wasn't just about him. It was about a fragile balance that had already been formed, and he was the one stepping into it. At first, resentment lingered quietly in his chest. He noticed everything. How Zoya moved around the house as if she belonged there. How Meher reached for her instinctively. How even the smallest routines had adjusted to include her presence. But slowly, something else began to take root. Understanding. He saw the way Zoya avoided sitting at the main table unless asked. The way she never touched anything that felt too personal. The way she worked tirelessly without expecting recognition. The way her eyes softened whenever Meher laughed. And one afternoon, when he returned unexpectedly from a short trip to the market, he saw something that shifted everything. Zoya was sitting on the floor with Meher, helping her draw. The child's laughter filled the room as she proudly showed her scribbles, and Zoya responded with a warmth so genuine it couldn't be faked. For a moment, she forgot herself, forgot her place, her fears, her past, and simply existed in that small pocket of happiness. It wasn't replacement. It was healing. Arman stood there longer than he realized, watching a scene he had once believed he would never see again. Something inside him softened. Life, he began to understand, doesn't always return what it takes from you. Sometimes, it gives you something different and asks you to trust it. As weeks turned into months, the tension in the house slowly dissolved. Conversations became easier. Silences became less heavy. And the invisible line that had once separated Arman and Zoya began to fade. Not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent moments of shared humanity. They were both survivors of loss. They just carried it differently. And perhaps that was why they began to understand each other, without needing too many words. But the world outside wasn't as kind. Whispers began. Neighbors questioned. Relatives judged. A widowed woman living under the same roof as a single man. It was a story people were too eager to twist into something scandalous. The pressure built quietly at first, then more openly. Suggestions were made. Warnings were given. Lines were drawn by people who had never stepped inside that house, who had never seen reality behind their assumptions. Arman found himself at a crossroads.